Hey Growing Zone kids, it's Pastor Jason. Let's go through another question from the New City Catechism for Kids. This week's question is question 19. And the question is there any way to escape punishment and be brought back into God's favor? The answer, of course, is yes. God reconciles us to himself by a redeemer. Well, last week we talked about the need for a punishment for sin. When sin happens, when we sin against God or each other, a punishment has to happen in order to make things right. Well, this week we're going to talk a little bit more about that and really think about what it means to have a punishment and what it means to have Jesus take the punishment for us. Now, there are some big words in this question, so we should go over a couple of them. So the question is there any way to escape punishment and be brought back into God's favor? Well, what does favor mean? And I think a good way to look at it this week is that favor can mean being in relationship with God. Let's think of favor this way. Let's say you have a brother or a sister or a best friend, and you do something that's not very nice. Maybe you do something that's mean to them. Well, what happens to your relationship? Is it still good? Not really, right? It's broken. You hurt your relationship with your friend or your brother or sister. So when that happens, you're not in favor with your friend anymore because your relationship is broken. So what needs to happen in order for your relationship to be fixed with your brother or sister or friend? In other words, what needs to happen so that you are in favor again with your friend? And the answer is you need to be reconciled with them, which leads us to the second big word in this question and answer, is that we need to be reconciled to God through a redeemer. Reconciled means that you have that relationship fixed. It's the way to fix a relationship. It's to be reconciled to each other. So, if you've hurt your friend's feeling and said something mean, the way to reconcile to your friend is to go and say you're sorry, is to apologize, is to ask for forgiveness. You know, it's the same way with us and God. When we sin, we break our relationship with God and we fall out of God's favor. Our relationship is not what it should be. And what we need to be is reconciled to God. So the thing is, when it comes to our relationship with God, God's never the one to break it. It's always us. God never does anything wrong. He never does anything mean to us. It's always us who break our relationship with God. And so we need our relationship fixed with God. We need to be back into God's favor, and we need to be reconciled to God. One of my favorite Christmas songs is Hark the Herald Angels Sing. And in one of those lines, we just sang that, right, at Christmas time. One of those lines is, God and sinners reconciled. When we sing that at Christmas time, we're singing about how us as sinners are reconciled to God by Jesus coming to earth. Okay, so we understand that we've fallen out of favor with God. Our relationship is broken. And we also know that we need to fix this relationship with God. We need to be reconciled to him. Well, the question is, how exactly does that happen? Well, to start off, the answer tells us is that we don't actually do the fixing. It's God that does the fixing. The answer to this question is that God reconciles us to himself through a redeemer. We don't do the fixing. God does. And we don't do the fixing because there's nothing we can do to fix our relationship with God. We can't try hard enough. We can't do enough good things. We can't be sorry enough. No, there's nothing we can do to fix our relationship with God. We need God to fix it for us. Now you might be thinking, but wait, weren't we the ones who broke our relationship? If we broke the relationship with God, shouldn't we be the ones to fix it? Well, yeah, but we're not able to. And God is so loving and so kind to us that he stepped in and offered to fix it for us, knowing that we can't do it on our own. And how does God do it? Well, the answer tells us this too. The answer is that God reconciles us to himself by a redeemer. And that's the next biggest word in this question is redeemer. What is a redeemer? Well, for today, I think the best way to think about what a redeemer is somebody who fixes our relationship with God by something that he does. Well, last week we talked about how when we sin against God, and everybody has sinned against God, we talked about when we sin against God, we deserve a punishment. Well, this redeemer has come so that we could escape the punishment of God. That means the punishment doesn't go onto us, but it has to go somewhere else or onto somebody else. So the Redeemer reconciles us to God by causing us to escape the punishment that God has for us. Well, we also talked last week about God has to do something about sin. He can't just ignore it. Well, the punishment has to go somewhere. And if this Redeemer lets us escape the punishment, well, where does the punishment go? And here's how it works. You see, the punishment for our sin is still there. It's just not us who has to take it. Any guesses as to who offered to take the punishment for us? Well, I think you know. We talked about it a lot last week. It's Jesus. So Jesus is our Redeemer. He's the one who fixes our relationship with God, and the way he does it is by taking the punishment for our sin for us. And then that means those who believe in Jesus are back into God's favor. Our relationship is fixed. I like to think about it like this. Now let's say that you get in trouble. And be honest, we all get into trouble. So let's say you get into trouble and the punishment for what you did is that you have to spend some time alone in your room. Nobody likes that, right? But that's your punishment. And you deserve this punishment, don't you? But then imagine for a second that your mom or dad comes up to you and says, hey, you deserve to go to your room, but I'm going to go to your room for you. Your mom or dad says, I'm going to sit in your room in the timeout and I'm going to let you go free. Do you know what's happening there? The punishment is still happening. Someone's taking the punishment. Your mom or dad is taking the punishment. Do they deserve it? No, but they're taking it for you. Why? Because they love you and they want to fix the relationship between you and them. And that's called grace. That's exactly what Jesus did for us. You and I deserve the punishment, but he took the punishment himself in order to reconcile us to God, in order to fix our relationship with God. Now that's good news.